Ah, no. There we go. All right, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Becoming Competitive. In this episode, as soon as I pull it up, we're going to talk about how to truly practice. Not just how to go out and play games, but how to actually practice. Now, I don't really have any good visuals or anything, and I don't particularly want my face to be the giant screen, so you get a little tiny me and this pretty X-Wing picture I found. So, enjoy. Um, so there's a few ways to practice. We're going to talk about practicing alone, practicing at just casual play, like a local game night, just with friends. You could still practice in that environment, and then how to practice at like a league night or a tournament where the games are strictly timed, people are actually playing to win. And then we're just going to talk about a few other things that are good to do that'll help you. There's no real visuals or math in this. It's just going to be me giving you my impressions, a lot of things I do um, that have definitely helped me get better at the game. So, one thing I don't think a lot of people realize they can do, or sometimes just don't consider doing, is going to be practicing alone. There's a few ways you can do this. The most simple way is just fly casual. Now, fly casual is not going to help you in terms of playing better, but what it is going to do, especially with a brand new list, and especially with a list with a lot of triggers, it's going to help you ingrain those triggers into your head. Because on fly casual, depending on what settings you do, every single time you have the option for a trigger to go off, it's going to ask you, do you want to do this? Yes or no? And so you're going to get that constant reminder. Now, I can do about 2 or 3 games on fly casual before I'm like, stop this. This is really annoying. And then that's it. I don't do a lot of fly casual, but if you're really stressed for time, getting those reps in on fly casual, 4, 5, 6 games against random computers can help you get through some of that early game of a list where who you're playing, what you're doing doesn't really matter. You're still trying to just get a feel for the list. So if you can get some of that done on fly casual without actual table time, especially if table time is something you're struggling for, then that's a really great way to do it. The next thing is going to be to head sim. Now, I'm not going to go into what the current meta is because I want this video series to still be relevant in 2 years. Now, I may use specific examples because it illustrates a point, but I'm not going to actually talk about, well, Jedi are very good right now. And you know what? Gosh darn those droid swarms. We're not going to get into what the actual good meta is. But if you're becoming competitive, figuring out the meta on your own or in your local group is something you're going to need to constantly be talking about and evolving. So even if I talk to you about the meta right now, in a week or 2 or 4 weeks, it's going to change. And if you want to learn about the meta, all the podcasts talk about it. They'd love to have you listen to what they got to say. But once you understand what the meta is and know what the meta is, head sim against it. So I'm going to keep using my national list as an example just because it's the list I've been playing for the last 3 months. So I've really got it ingrained and I've done all this with it. So when I was head simming with it, I would think, all right, when I go against a droid swarm, that's actually a kind of difficult matchup. It's definitely a winnable one, but it's not one where I can make a mistake and win. Right? Like I have to be on the ball, I have to be perfect in my play, I have to execute well, and if I don't, I'm probably just going to lose. So in my head, I would kind of go back to the games I've played against droids, either with my current list or with other lists, because most lists are going to fly kind of similar no matter what they're flying against. With variations, of course, but generally lists kind of tend to have the same tendency. Wow, that was a lot of the same words there. But if you can work out in your head, envision, all right, I want to engage this way. I want to try and get this ship on the flank. If he gets in trouble and they turn into him, if I put him on a flank, is that ship capable of escaping? Maybe, who knows? But go through your head and just be like, all right, this is how I think I want to try and engage against this list. this is how I think I want to try and engage against this type of list. And if you've spent, I don't know, if you're driving to work, or you just have an hour bored at work, or I don't know, you're doing laundry and you want to do something, or you're just watching TV and it's like, maybe I could do something more productive than that. Head simming's great. Sitting down, looking at the meta, and just trying to figure out in your head ahead of time, how would I engage this type of list? And the nice thing about this is, if you've done all this thinking beforehand, when you actually get to the table, you know what to do. There's not a ton of thinking involved. And this can also help you figure out strategies to beat your hard counters. So the perfect example of this was I was flying in 1.0 TLT aggressors. Double tapping turrets, 360-degree arc, you just can't attack at range 1. And for the first 10 or 15 games, every time I hit aces, Imperial aces with auto thrusters, I would just lose. Or, what was the other one? Fang Fighters. Fang Fighters were killing me pretty hard. And it took me about 15 games to be like, man, I really need to figure out a way to beat these. So I went home, I thought about it, I head simmed a lot of things, and then it dawned on me. Range 2 is their danger zone. So I was like, how do I exploit this? And I probably thought about this problem for 3 or 4 hours total, which is probably way longer than I should have, but it just wasn't clicking for some reason. And then eventually I figured out, oh, I actually need to fly in a box formation. Front 2 ships range 1 apart, the back 2 ships range 1 from the front 2 in a box. So I've basically got a range 1 box. And all I'm going to do is 1 straight at the enemy, and then 1 bank. And just keep the scary ace in front of me. Because I've got 360 turrets. So if a big lumbering ship gets on my flank, I don't care. I can still shoot it out the side. But it's the aces I cared about. And what this allowed me to do was, as long as I just kept banking and keeping those aces in front of me, they were never able to flank. So when they finally engaged, if they engaged at range 1 of my front guys, my back guys had range 2. Which is perfect. Because range 2 in arc with TLTs just means you've got dead aces. If they got at range 2 of my front guys, well, they're at range 2 there. Sure, auto thrusters are going to kick in for the back ones, but that's a lot of really high quality shots. And as soon as I figured that out, oh my god, aces became an easy matchup for me. And all that came from the head sim. So the next one is going to be dice calculator versus the meta. In a previous video, I went through, in the very first video I think it was, I went through the dice calculator. Alright, if Vader shoots first, then Echo shoots, then the shuttle shoots, what are my odds of killing a Y-Wing? Went through, figured all that out using the dice calculator, and was like, cool, now I know I can consistently kill this in 1 round if I engage correctly. So if you use the dice calculator against the meta, especially in like a weird matchup where you're like, man, I don't know how I'm supposed to engage this. How am I supposed to kill it? Let's go through my shots, figure out what's likely to happen, and see if strategy I'm using with just the glancing shots will eventually kill it, or whether I need to come up with a real strategy that involves blocking and then getting a shot, or just throwing my lock on there and saving it until I get that quality shot. That sort of thing. And using that dice calculator to figure out what needs to shoot where against certain styles of ships. You can just do that, on your phone, on your computer at work, if you're allowed access to that kind of stuff. Anywhere. That's just a thing you can do by yourself. Now, the next one you can do by yourself, but you're going to need a little board space, because practicing your opening and setups is pretty important. This is one I am bad about doing. I do it sometimes, and with my last list, I definitely did it a little bit. I should do it more, though. I don't do this with every list, and I really need to. But it helps. The one thing I did with Vader Echo Psi was I realized I really liked the Shuttle and Vader by themselves and Echo off to the side. Now, the one thing I realized was a lot of times I was squeezing Vader too close to the board edge. So on my initial setup, I would try and get the shuttle to be range 4 straight from the board edge. At least a 4 straight from the board edge. What that allowed me to do was place Vader on the inside of the shuttle between the board edge and the shuttle. But I would make sure I had a range 1 from Vader to the edge of the board. What this allowed me to do was barrel roll Vader out if I needed to. Because a couple times I was like, I need to barrel roll Vader. I tried to barrel him out and it was like, oh no, there's not enough board there. So I actually lost one game because I just never even thought of that. So once I figured that out, I would start measuring out my setup. And one thing a lot of people don't realize, on the initial setup of the game, you're not allowed to extend past range 1 on the board. But what you are allowed to do is whatever you want to inside range 1. If you got to get all your templates out and put them down, as long as they're within range 1 of the edge of the board, you can use whatever templates and ships you need to get your ships organized correctly. So you can have pre-measured out stuff. Generally, I don't like to measure out too many things, but I do like to measure out very specific things that I know I might have to do. Another perfect example of this was when I was playing Sai and Ryad. The Defender and Ryad would be side by side. Well, one of the nice tricks I had was Ryad can turn a straight into a K-turn. Well, Sai can also coordinate. So if I was going against low agility stuff, what I would do, or not low agility, low pilot skill stuff, was Sai would then move and then look at the board. And Ryad would almost always have a 5 straight dialed in. And if I needed to coordinate the boost to Ryad, Ryad would boost left, boost right, boost straight if I needed to, get that extra distance to jump past somebody, or boost to either side in order to just dodge a bunch of arcs. And then I could choose to K-turn if I needed to. Well, I realized after a little bit, I needed to precisely measure out how far from the board edge Ryad started, because if I were to boost towards the board and then do that 5K, I didn't want to fly off. I never actually did it. I never actually flew off, but I became so close one game, I was like, nope, I am pre-measuring this every time. I forget what the actual measurement was at this point, but I had it pre-measured, so I knew as soon as I set him up, as long as I go straight and never barrel to the right, I'll never fly off the board to the right. So a lot of that stuff you can do at home by yourself, set it up, kind of get used to that. Some lists need to saw. So say you're flying a shuttle and you really want to trap your shuttle on the board edge for 2 or 3 turns, because as soon as that shuttle commits, if he commits wrong, uh-oh. So, practice if you need to stall your shuttle for a turn or 2 just to see what the enemy's doing. And then also with the shuttle, practice stalling in the middle of the board. Like, say you 3 straight out the shuttle and then the opponent did something weird and you're like, man, if my shuttle goes forward now, I'm screwed. So let me make sure Vader's in a position where he can barrel in front of the shuttle if I need the shuttle to bump 1 or 2 turns while the enemy does whatever acrobatics they're doing in the corner. The other good thing you can practice is any common moves you have. So with like Sai Ryad would regularly get boosted a barrel, get coordinated a boost, and swing that 5K around. So what I did at home a little bit was I'd just throw Ryad on the board and I'd be like, where can I boost to swing this 5K? And then I'd start looking at this table setup and really analyzing how that worked. So if you've got any interesting movement tricks that you don't necessarily need an opponent to practice, figure those out ahead of time. And then any complicated tricks you have. So say you've got 2 B-Wings and you want to make sure that they can do their 1 talons crisscrossing. How far apart do they need to be for that to work? If you've got a B-Wing and a X-Wing, if one does the 1 talon and one does the 3 talon, how does that end up on the other side? How far apart do they need to be? Those are all things you can pre-measure and know ahead of time. And if you know them, but your opponent's looking at it and he's not sure, you've just gained an advantage because you know for sure those two moves fit, while your opponent's like, I don't know if they do. And then when they think they don't, because like every once in a while your opponent will be like, there's no way that fits. But because you've practiced it, because you know it, you're like, that of course fits 100% of the time. I won many games with Ryad because I was so confident that my boost towards the board edge 5K was going to land. And it would land with, 3 or 4 millimeters to spare because I pre-measured. And my opponents would be like, I thought you were going to fly off the board. I didn't. And then Ryads just got their back for 2 or 3 turns because they gave it to me for free. So if you practice those like common things that are unique to your list, you can gain a very significant advantage. And then the next thing, rocks. Rocks are incredibly important. I'm not going to go into rocks too much in this episode, other than to say they're important, because I'm planning on doing an actual episode on rocks. But know they're important. Don't neglect them. Spend some time at home thinking about what obstacles you should bring, whether it's rocks, debris, or gas clouds. Because I know with my list, I was originally running rocks, and then the Nantex came out, and the swarms started becoming popular. Because the swarms were not popular when it started, or when I started with the list. So I really enjoyed actually having rocks at first. And then the swarms started becoming a thing, and landing struts started becoming a thing, and I was like, man, these struts are kind of annoying, and I don't want opponents having that many options. So because of both the Nantec and the swarms, I actually switched into gas clouds, even though the gas clouds are my least favorite obstacle, because they helped me against the meta the most. So figure out what obstacles are good for your list, and go with that. And the funny thing is, a lot of times you will choose an obstacle that slightly diminishes your list a little bit. And this is true for a lot of things in your list. It might like lower your win percent by 1% against the field. But lowering it that 1% might give you a 30% extra chance to win against one scary list that you've been having trouble with. And if that math works out in your head that you're like, you know what? I don't mind giving up the small advantage generally to get a huge advantage where I need it. That might be a thing that's important, and rocks actually can play a big role there. So now we're going to go into casual play. This is where I think a lot of people lose out on a good amount of practice. A lot of people think their league night or their local tournaments where people are taking the game seriously are the only time they can get quality practice, and I think the reverse is actually true. I think casual play is where you can get some of your best practice. Now, in order to do this, you need to be playing against someone that is willing to participate with you. So if you're playing against a new guy or someone that just doesn't want to do some of these things or doesn't care about practice or is just there to have fun, maybe you won't get as much out of that particular game, but there's still some strategies you can do to get something out of that. But if you've got an opponent that's willing to like work with you and talk about some stuff, casual play is where I get my best practice, completely best practice. So the first thing to do is, if your list does not, say you're running a list, like my list ran at 200 points. What I would do in casual play was just always let my opponent choose initiative. Always. Because the reality is, anytime it mattered in a tournament, at best, I was rolling for initiative, and more likely than not, they were just going to choose because they weren't at 200 points. So when I was practicing, I said, you know what, opponent, you always choose. I don't care if we're both at 200. We're not rolling. You just choose. And I only started doing this maybe a year ago, but I found it really helps. Like, it helps a lot. Because I never have to care about, the initiative doesn't matter to me anymore. Now, if you're playing a list with an 18-point bid, clearly initiative matters to you, and this may not be the correct choice for you. Because you need to play with initiative, you're spending 18 points for it. But if you're playing with a 199, 198, 200 bid, your list obviously doesn't care that much about initiative. So when you practice with the handicap. Because a lot of lists, if you want the initiative and you win it, okay, you should know what to do. But it's playing with the disadvantage that a lot of players have mental blocks against. So I've just been letting my opponents choose initiative almost a year now in my casual games, and a lot of my league nights too. My league, our local league, is slightly more casual than not. So for the most part, we have a gentleman's agreement. As long as you're doing something for like legitimate practice purposes, you know, you don't have to stress too much about it. And to be honest, I haven't turned in a league slip in probably 2 years because I'm just there for the practice. I don't care about anything else. But in a tournament, roll the dice. You should follow the tournament rules. But in casual play, let your opponent choose. It will help you a lot always playing with that disadvantage. The next thing to do in casual play is after you have a complicated turn, pause your game timer. I know at our store we each run individual game timers for 75 minutes, even in casual play. So a lot of times we'll pause the game timer and talk about the turn. Like, you did this, and I thought you were going to do this. Why did you do that? You spent this token here. I didn't think my ship was that important, but you spent your wedge token and left yourself defenseless. Like, why did you do that? And sometimes your opponent will have a reason, and sometimes they'll just be like, I wanted to kill you. But you don't know unless you sit there and talk about it. And this will do two things. One, it'll make your opponent slightly better. Because if they're like, oh, I didn't think about that, I probably shouldn't have spent my focus there. Like, okay, maybe that's something Wedge doesn't want to do. Wedge is taking 3 shots. Maybe he doesn't want to spend his focus on offense. Maybe he just wants to live. Because maybe Wedge living is worth way more than that single shot. Who knows? Because if you make your opponents better while you get better, that just leads to everyone being better, including you in your future practice games. But talk about those complicated turns. Ask your opponent what he would do if he had your ships. What shots would he have taken compared to what shots you took? And then during combat, also, pause. Like, maybe you want to do this before shooting. Maybe you want to do it after shooting. Against one of my practice partners who I've been playing a lot of practice games with, we'll actually pause before very crucial moments of the game, and we'll talk them out and be like, all right, look, I think you should attack this ship here because you've got 2 quality shots and 1 mess shot. But if you put all your guns here, I'm pretty sure you just win the game if it works. I don't know what the odds are. We can figure that out later. But, I mean, I think that's what it is. Because if I lose that ship, I don't see my win condition. And he'll be like, yeah, but I want to do this, this, and this. Because if I do this, I think I might do it. And we'll sit there and we'll have the debate right there in the middle of the game. And then we'll try and come to a conclusion between the two of us what he should do. Then we'll look at it from my perspective, and we'll try and figure out what I should do. Because if the two of us are trying to figure it out, and we're not, like, we're both playing to win, but we don't care about the outcome. If I lose, it doesn't matter. The game's meaningless. But if I learn some information about my list, and he learns some information about his list, when we go to that major tournament, we're both going to do better, and that's the purpose. So pausing in the middle of games is incredibly useful, incredibly helpful, because a lot of folks will talk about the game afterwards. But talking about the game in the middle of it and being like, I think this is the crucial point. I think you have to gamble everything right now for this ship, because if you don't, I don't see how you win. So try and find players that will do that kind of thing with you. Not everyone will, nor do you want to with everyone. Like, you don't want to do that with a brand new player if you're practicing for Worlds. I mean, you may want to do that with a brand new player just to help them, but they're not looking for that high level play. They're probably just looking to have fun. So you got to evaluate who you're playing with and whatnot when you do that. And then the last part of casual play is, if there's a clear winner, call the game. Just end it. Restart. Play him. Play a new opponent. Do something. Because if you waste 20 minutes with Vader, Echo, Psy chasing down, I don't know, Obi-Wan. He's just got Obi-Wan left. Like, look, Obi-Wan's not soloing the rest of my list. We know that. I managed to kill your other 2 friends without taking any damage. You're not going to solo me here. Us playing out the next 20 or 30 minutes is us just wasting 20 or 30 minutes time. where we could be starting a new game. So get that new game started. Meaningless practice is just meaningless practice. It doesn't actually mean anything. All right. The next one is going to be league night and local tournaments. So I'm saying that because these are things that people kind of take seriously. Like, I know there's some leagues that are very, like, winning league is, a symbol of pride. So people take it pretty seriously. Winning your local tournament. There's only one tournament a month at some stores. Everyone shows up for it. That's the one that matters. Like, people take that stuff seriously. And this is good tournament practice because it's going to give you a good competitive headspace to play in because the other people are trying extremely hard to win. Sometimes. Now, if your local scene is a little more casual, okay, treat it slightly more like casual play. But this is generally going to be a good type of play to practice your tournament performance. Now, in these settings, one thing I would try and do is in your head, envision yourself at a system open or a grand championship. And envision that you are 4-1. Going into the 6th round, you're 4-1 in Swiss. As we all know, 5-1s make it to the cut any tournament you go to. If you go 5-1, you're in the cut. If you go 4-2 at a system open, goodbye. Some grand championships 4-2 will make it. Not sure, but 5-1 at any tournament you ever go to is going to get you to day 2. So in your head, try and go into that very first game going, I'm 4-1, this is for all the marbles. It's hard to make that thing, that headspace, but if you could do it and just kind of add that little extra pressure to the game, it'll help you think more in the same way you're going to think in a major tournament. So it's just a head thing, a head game you got to play with yourself. But if you can do it, if you can visualize the moment, it'll help a little bit. One thing I'll do is I will let my opponents know I'm practicing for this event, right? Especially if you bring in the same list 2 months straight or whatever. Just let your opponent know, hey, I'm practicing for an event, so, I'm going to Worlds in 2 weeks. I'm going to the Philly System Open. I'm driving down to Atlanta in 2 weeks. So, I'm really practicing, so give me your best. And if you tell people that, a lot of times they'll be like, oh, okay. And they'll actually focus themselves a little more and give you a slightly tougher game. Because remember, winning that local tournament is not important. The practice for the major tournament is what matters to you. And then play the game as if everything matters. So I know there's some leagues out there, MOV doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. MOV is just thrown out the window. Just play 12 games. Whoever wins the most wins. Period. There's a tie, playoff, whatever. I've heard of leagues like that. Say it's a local tournament and you got 8 players. That means you're going to play 3 games. One person's going to be 3-0. So if you're not 3-0, MOV doesn't matter. However, play it as if MOV does matter. At the System Opens in the current format, and we will talk about major tournament strategy in another video, but right now at System Opens, you got to go 5-1. So 4-2 doesn't matter. However, at Hyperspace Trials, if you've got a 80-person Hyperspace trial, 4-2s are going to make the cut sometimes, right? If you've got the Grand Championship, 4-2s will make it. So your MOV actually matters for your ranking there. So don't just throw away games that you've lost. Play them out because you got to conserve your MOV. Now, I said earlier, don't waste 20 minutes trying to end a game that's over. Game's over, and you're just in a casual game. Clearly reset. But in a tournament structure, this is the perfect time to play it out to the nitty-gritty end. Because maybe those 20 points are the difference between you making the cut and not making the cut at a Hyperspace trial. It might be. So maybe you want to be like, man, how do I preserve as many points as I can? Or, all right, I'm down to 2 ships. I'm going to lose this, but is there any way I can get Han to half? Because Han's worth 130 points in his build. If I can get him to half and snag 65 MOV, even if I give up 30 points on another half of one of my ships, I think that's worth it. So, when you're playing those tournament games, play them as if everything matters. And this is the next one is a huge thing. Don't ask for take backsies. If you miss a trigger, you missed your trigger, right? If you put a template on the board and you are going to barrel roll, and you put it there, and then you're like, oh wait, hold on, it's clearly not going to fit. Too late. You do it because you need to learn not to make those critical mistakes or those little things that most players are going to be like, I don't care. Because in a major tournament, you're not going to get away with some of that, right? You put that dial down and it gets close to it touches your base, and you're going to barrel roll, and then as soon as that template's down, you're like, oh, it's not going to fit because of that rock. Nope, too late. That template was on your base. You've measured. That action is locked in. You just failed your barrel roll. So, no take backsies. If you announce target lock focus, put it down, and then you're starting to move your next ship, you're like, oh, wait, hold on. I need to boost barrel here instead. Nope, you picked your actions. So, take your time. Plan your actions. Do not slow play. For the love of God, don't slow play. But, when you make a decision, make sure that's your actual decision. So, eat your mistakes. This is one of the bigger things. If you eat your mistakes and own them, making a mistake and losing a game is probably the best learning tool you can make. And I can't tell you how many times flying Echo, I've been like, you know what? The best possible move I have is boost to the right, decloak towards the board edge, and then 3 hard. But I don't know if it keeps me on the board. And I'll sit there for 30 seconds, a minute, trying to visualize it and just be like, that is the move. It's the move. It's the move. God, does it land? And then eventually I'll be like, you know what? It's practice. It doesn't matter. It's a tournament. I don't care if I win this tournament. I need to know if this move fits. So I'll dial the move in and do it. I've flown my Echo off the board a couple times doing this. Okay, you know what I learned? I learned. All right, in that position, I just can't do it. And I'll go back and I'll measure out some things, try and figure out, all right, just inside this range, I'm going off the board if I do it. Or if I'm not perfectly angled, or if I'm angled too much in, it's going to bring me farther than normal. So do not be scared to be like, this is the best move. I don't know if it lands. I'm going to do it anyway because I need to learn. Failing on those things is one of the best learning tools you can get. The other one's going to be break down your games with your opponents after the game. This is a pretty common thing. I've heard a lot of podcasters talk about this. It's simple. Talk to your opponent after the game. This is going to be more about win conditions rather than specific engagements. And that's why in the casual play I was saying pause the game and talk about it. After the game, you're talking about more grand schemes. So in the actual, like, what do we do at this turn? That's talking about the micro of the game. After the game, you're talking more about the macro. Like, you should have engaged this way. You should have tried to flank me. Don't joust me, that sort of stuff. And then league night and local tourney. Hard to simulate this at a local tournament, but some of them you can. League night you definitely can. If you're going to go to a System Open, a Grand Championship, Worlds, one of these major tournaments where you're playing at least 6 games of Swiss, sometimes 7, getting a 6-game practice trial with your list in before you go is huge. Getting multiple of these is really big. So I know locally we've got a lot of guys that can't make the tournament, but they get out of work at 5, so when the tournament's over, they're free to play. So what I've done before is I'll go to the tournament, I'll try and meet somebody there an hour and a half early, get a game in. At noon, we'll start the tournament. I'll play 3 games in the tournament, and then I've coordinated with another buddy to come up and play 2 more games with me after that tournament. Now, I've got the day off. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I can play X-Wing 12 hours in a single day during my week and get away with it. Maybe you can't. But if you can, getting those 6 games in is huge. Like, it trains you what to do with your list. At the end of the game 6, you're tired, you're playing a fresh opponent, and you have to do well. So it's good practice. On a league night, like our league nights are kind of casual. It's just show up and play somebody and turn in a slip. Doesn't matter who you play or anything like that. I will try and coordinate with folks to get there as early as the first person can get there. So if they can show up at 1 o'clock, I will get there at 1 and I will stay till 10 as long as people are there playing. And I will try and crush as many games as I can get in. I think my record's like 9 games in one day. I had a killer list that all of our games were over within like 35, 40 minutes. Either they killed me or I killed them. It was a blast, but what that'll do is that'll kind of get you into that simulation of what Swiss is going to be like. Because those games 5 and 6, when you're exhausted, when you're just tired of playing X-Wing, you're like, man, I've been playing all day, but you're 4-1. The next game matters. That's where some of that practice is going to start paying off. All right, and then these are just some other good things to do. Find a practice partner. This is a big one. It can be a group of practice partners. It doesn't have to be one person. But find a person or a couple people that don't mind kicking your ass 5 or 6 times in a row. I say this not joking. We got a local guy. He helps me a lot with my practice. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll be like, hey, are you free tomorrow? Yeah. Can you meet me at the store? I need to practice against this list. He'll bring the list, and it'll be my hard counter. Like, I still haven't figured out how to beat it. He'll put it on the table. We'll play a game. We won't talk about it. We'll just play a game. And after the game's over, I'll be like, all right, what do you think I should do? Like, how do I engage this? You just kicked my ass. That's the first time you've ever played the list. I've got 100 reps in with my list, and you just murdered me. It wasn't even close. And we'll talk about it, and we'll reset, and then we'll engage. And as soon as the game is decisively over, we'll stop. We'll reset. We'll engage. And I'll do that 4, 5, 6 times. Because if you're resetting quickly, games are over within like 30 minutes. So you can get, 5, 6, 8 games in like 3 to 4 hours. You're not playing to completion. You're playing until it's decidedly over. So we'll do that. And like I've had my friend beat me. I think the farthest we gone was he beat me 7 times in a row with a list. And then all of a sudden I beat him. It wasn't that day. It was like the next week. But I beat that list. I didn't beat it every time, but all of a sudden it was like, ooh, I went from losing like 95% of the time to I can beat this list like 35, 40% of the time. And that doesn't sound like a lot. But when you can up your win rate against a particular list by 40% or 30% through practice, that makes a huge amount of difference. Because that's against a terrible list. Imagine if you can practice against a list that you're just a 60-40 underdog on. Like you just lose 40% of the time. But you put that dedication and practice in, and you change it to where now you're beating that list 60-40. Now you're slightly favored, even though you probably shouldn't be because you practiced against it a lot. That's where finding that one practice partner that doesn't mind sitting there for 3 or 4 hours just analyzing something with you and figuring it out and doesn't mind kicking your ass. Because some people enjoy just winning, but a lot of times when you're just slaughtering someone, it's not fun for either of you. But if you're both doing it with the practice mindset and together trying to figure it out, it can help a lot. Now, this is a thing I have done a lot, and I wish more people would do. Find a decent player. This really works if you've got 2 players that are close in skill level. Find a decent player. Ask them to fly your hard counter. Fly against it once or twice, and then say, let's trade lists. So now you fly the hard counter and have them fly your list. Because generally, if they're a very good player and you're in your meta and you've been practicing a list for a while, you've played 6, 7, 8 games with them maybe over the course of a month or 2 with your list. So even though they're going into your list cold, they understand your list. They know the triggers. They know what it does. They know how it kills. They know its weaknesses. So if they start playing your list and you're playing your hard counter, that change of perspective can really help you identify your own list weaknesses and then the weakness of the list you're having trouble against. So trading your list for your opponent's list is a really good way to learn. I already said this. I'm going to say it again. Losing is good. The best learning experiences come when you get your butt kicked. Losing helps you learn so many lessons. I can't stress this enough. Uh, it's funny. I took the list to nationals. I ended up going 11-1 total. One. I took that same list to worlds. 6-1, 3-1. So I went 9-2 at worlds total against top quality opponents. Uh, like that's great. Those are incredibly good win percentages. But guess what? I don't win that much with my list locally. Why? Well, the first time you play a list against somebody, they don't know what your list does unless they've practiced against it. If it's a meta list, sometimes they'll understand it. But the reality is, even if it's a meta list, they don't know what you're going to do with it because everyone flies their own list differently. Two people can fly the same list completely different ways. I know this because I saw 9 copies of my list in the field at Worlds. 9 different people were playing it. And on my day off where I wasn't actually playing in the event, I was just kind of chilling, I walked around and I watched people play my list. And it was fascinating to see the different things. Some of it I was like, that's terrible. But some of it I was like, oh, I never thought of that. That's amazing. And I incorporated some of that into my play. So the first time you play someone, even if you've seen the list before, you're at a disadvantage. Now, they are too if first time they've played you. But now I'm playing one of my local guys, and it's the 5th time he's played against my list. Now, he's on his 4th different list against me because he likes to change, but he knows my list. So now he's got an advantage. He knows how I fly. He knows what I'm trying to do. He knows that Echo wants to sneak around the side. He knows all those things. So you keep playing the same people. They understand your list. They start breaking it down. You start losing more. I ended up locally going, it was like 6-4 the week before I went to nationals locally. Just like the locals, they know what to do. They beat me. But then I go to nationals, no one's ever seen it before, and I do great. So losing is good. It gives you practice. It simulates playing against harder players. So don't be afraid to lose. It's fine. And then practice makes perfect. Talk about the game. Practice makes perfect. I'm going to talk about this in another video about how many games to play with lists and that kind of stuff. So there's going to be another video following up on practicing, but this is more like practicing in general. But do practice your list. It helps so much. I can't stress that enough. If you're the type of player that makes a new list each week, it's going to be very hard to become competitive with that. Now, there are the savants out there that don't need any practice with a list. I'm not one of them. I can be very good with 5 or 6 reps and probably win a lot of games, but maybe not at the highest level. So just get that practice in, and it'll help you. This is one of those videos. I covered a lot of things. I did not cover all the things. There are tons of things out there that will help you practice. If anyone wants to add a comment to this video down below, different things you do to practice, feel free, because look, the purpose of the series is to help everyone get better. So if there's a thing you do that you found very helpful in practice, put it down below. And if enough of those get put down there that I feel another video on this topic is worth it to talk about more practice techniques, I'll do it gladly. But thanks for watching, guys. Don't know when the next video will be up, but I'll definitely have one up. So go become competitive. Have a good day.